Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. The AAP versus BJP fight went into the next orbit today as Manish Sisodia made a startling claim that he was being lured by the BJP to leave the Aam Aadmi Party and then all cases against him will be dropped. But Sisodia so far has refused to name who this BJP leader was who made this enticing offer to him. The BJP has hit back by saying, why doesn't the Aam Aadmi Party simply come clean on the allegations, the very specific allegations that are material to the liquor scam in which Manish Sisodia is accused number one? But is all of this being couched up in the run-up to Gujarat 2022? Can the Aam Aadmi Party emerge as a challenger, and a serious one at that, to the BJP in Gujarat? Or is it going to get lost in the entrenched politics of Gujarat, where the BJP has been the incumbent, the ruling party, the party to beat for the last 30 years, and the Congress has been dying trying?
Day 3 now after the CBI raids, and beyond criminality and actual findings on Liquorgate, the AAP-BJP war is now almost entirely about political mudslinging. Fact or no fact? BJP's alleged scam culprit, Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia, has hit out in multiple ways, alleging a BJP bid to target Kejriwal ahead of 2024, scoffing at reports of a lookout circular, and now this. A tweet by Sisodia claims he's got a message from the BJP to break the AAP and join the BJP. He alludes to what has been termed the BJP washing machine that would absolve him of all wrongdoing. In Gujarat today, with Chief Minister Kejriwal, Sisodia rubbished BJP allegations, keeping up the AAP's education healthcare pitch.
ये CBI, ED जितने केस चल रहे हैं, इनकी सच्चाई तो मैं जानता हूं, क्योंकि ये सारे केस फर्जी हैं। मैं एक ईमानदार आदमी हूं। इनफैक्ट मैं अरविंद केजरीवाल जी की टीम में हूं ही इसलिए कि मैं एक कट्टर ईमानदार आदमी हूं। मैंने अब तक सारा काम ईमानदारी से किया है, कट्टर ईमानदारी से किया है। तो इन फर्जी केस में कोई दम नहीं है। आप इनकी धमकियां तो नहीं दे सकते मुझको।
A flurry of press conferences, AAP versus BJP, charge versus countercharge, remained the feature of the face-off as through the last 3 days. BJP rubbishes the charge of it looking to poach Sisodia, saying he has nothing concrete to offer.
जिनकी नीयत खोटी है, सोच छोटी है, उनको कोई क्या तोड़ेगा? कम से कम प्रश्नों के उत्तर तो दीजिए। 24 घंटे पूरे हो गए, उत्तर में आया एक ट्वीट में फिर वही अनर्गल बातें।
BJP's Delhi unit staged protests outside Arvind Kejriwal's residence in the capital today, keeping up the offensive on what it calls Team Kejriwal mired in corruption. In this now unending BJP-AAP war, the next salvo is round the corner.
All right, on the talking point this evening, Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, will be joined by Amrit Gill, spokesperson of the Congress Party, and Priyanka Kakkar, spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party. Kailash Adhikari is managing director at Governance Now, and Umesh Sehgal is former chief secretary of the state of Delhi. Let me start with Sanju Verma. Today there was a sensational claim that was made by Manish Sisodia. He said that he got a message in two parts. One said that all CBI and ED cases against him will be shut down, and the other said that if he were to leave AAP and join the BJP, he will be made the CM candidate. Please respond to this charge by the Delhi Deputy Chief Minister.
You know, Zaka, Manish Sisodia obviously is rattled. He's trying to deviate and deflect attention from the grave allegations against him. He has not made any clarifications with respect to serious charges against him. And the BJP has given ample documented proof about every single charge made against Manish Sisodia with respect to complete defiance of the GNCTD Act of 1991 by Manish Sisodia, the Delhi Excise Act of 2009, which was flouted by Manish Sisodia, Delhi Excise Rules of 2010, which were flouted by Manish Sisodia, Transaction of Business Rules of 1993, which were flouted by Manish Sisodia. He ran away from a press conference when he was asked what is his relationship with Arjun Pillai, Vijay Nair and Dinesh Arora. With Dinesh Arora, there is also a cash transaction allegedly involving Manish Sisodia. So now, in the larger context of the serious charges that have emerged against Manish Sisodia, with the CBI cracking its whip,
Okay.
I am not surprised in the least that Manish Sisodia says BJP ने मुझे कहा हमारी पार्टी ज्वाइन करिए और CBI और ED आपके खिलाफ सारी इन्वेस्टिगेशन बंद कर देगी. I, through your channel, I challenge as the national spokesperson of the BJP. I am asking Manish Sisodia, who from the BJP asked you to join the BJP? Is there a proof? Was there a conversation? Was it a telephonic conversation? Did you get a fax? Did you receive an email?
No, he is saying that he is saying that there was a conversation. It was a telephonic conversation. In fact, people close to him are also saying that there's a recording of that conversation. But anyway, I think what you've asked is a valid question. A, if the AAP is making such a sensational claim, they should come forth and clarify who exactly made this offer. And B, if they have proof of it, then put it out in the public domain. Let the people decide. But Amrit Gill of the Congress Party is also joining us. Amrit Gill, the charge against Manish Sisodia is he changed the Delhi excise policy from what used to be predominantly Sarkari thekas. It became private players, and private players were given undue favors and undue benefits. And some of that money came as kickbacks back to Manish Sisodia as well as other public officials. So far, though, other than one transaction, which has been shown in the CBI FIR, there has been no other information in the public domain that's been put forth by the government or by the BJP as to what exactly is this money trail, what exactly is this kickback, the part of the money that was waved off that came back to Manish Sisodia or the other public officials named. So in absence of that so far, how much legs do these allegations against Sisodia have?
Like, these are not the allegations. What Manish Sisodia is, he's the minister. He frames the minister frames the policies, and the ministers know all that how they will be making the money, how the money will go to the state exchequer, how the money, when they will be giving, they have given L1 licenses. And they have put it the clause that one company can make the tender who has a turnover of 150 crores. 150, why they have, they want liquor vendors, that's just a shop. So they can put the clause of 5 crores and anything, but they have put it there will be very, very less bidders so that they can give the benefits to the big companies, to their friends, to the people whom we are discussing, the banned companies also, the blacklisted companies. One of the companies in Madhya Pradesh which was blacklisted, and the people had made a cartel, and this Manish Sisodia and the AAP government of Delhi supported them through that. It's the wholesaler commission increases from 2% to 12%. What is it all that like?
Okay. Let me ask Priyanka Kakkar of the Aam Aadmi Party. Today, Manish Sisodia came out and said that he was asked to leave the Aam Aadmi Party. He was said that all cases against him by CBI and ED will be shut down, and that he will be projected as the chief ministerial candidate. Now, please, can we, and Sanju Verma asked this question before you joined this broadcast, who in the BJP made this offer? Do you have any proof that such an offer was made? If indeed you have such proof of this conversation happening between Manish Sisodia and whosoever this BJP leader was, then isn't your interest best served if you put it out in the public domain?
Zaka, good evening to you and all of viewers. Definitely, we will reveal the identity at the right time, but it is the same person who poached Mukul Roy, who poached Subendu Adhikari, and who poached Panda. Coming back to this, Zaka, it is a modus operandi of BJP, and I don't see why anyone is shocked. It is quite well known that this is what BJP does. They barrage the opposition with FIRs, then they topple the governments. We saw this in Maharashtra, how everyone was taken to Gujarat. They were given 5-star accommodations. There were helicopters which ferried them. Then they were taken to Assam, another BJP-ruled states. Then they were taken back to Maharashtra. So this is the modus operandi. And there is one allegation which has consistently stuck with the BJP is horse trading. We've often seen discussions and debates about anti-defection law. So all of that is playing out again. But Manish ji has also clearly said, categorically said कि वो भी महाराणा प्रताप के वंशज हैं और झुकेंगे नहीं, सर कटाना मंजूर है. You can file as many cases against us, you can level as many allegations. We've already had 150 cases
But ma'am,
against us.
why don't you
month,
answer the simple question that who is this person? Because if you have made this allegation, then it has to be basis something.
It will be revealed in time, but we've already given a big hint that it is the same person who contacted Mukul Roy, who contacted Suvendu Adhikari.
Okay. Let me go to Umesh Sehgal as well as Kailash Adhikari, both of whom are there in the broadcast. Umesh Sehgal, this whole thing, while the Aam Aadmi Party says, this is BJP using CBI, ED, IT, etc. for political vendetta, this whole thing got flagged off when the Chief Secretary wrote to the Lieutenant Governor, as per, I think, Rule 57 of the Rules of Business of the Government of Delhi, that there were, according to him, according to the Chief Secretary, flagrant violations. And it is basis the Chief Secretary's letter that the Delhi LG then intimated the CBI about what he thought were these flagrant violations. Now, the point is that the CBI is only coming into the picture because one bureaucrat found violations and that one bureaucrat passed it on to the Lieutenant Governor, and the Lieutenant Governor then subsequently passed it on to the CBI. That can't be then seen as a case of political vendetta.
Is the question to me, Zaka?
Umesh Sehgal, former Chief Secretary.
No, you see, the Chief Secretary has a role under the transaction of business rules to report to the Chief Minister and to the Lieutenant Governor any deviations from the transaction of business rules. Apparently, there were 3 or 4 important decisions taken which did not go to the Cabinet, did not go to the Lieutenant Governor, which according to the Chief Secretary should have gone. And those were related to hundreds of crores of rupees which were released to private parties without the approval of the competent authority. I don't think the Chief Secretary held anything more than that. He did point out that certain tender conditions had been violated, which is also a very bureaucratic thing, but he did not point out, and I don't think it was his duty to point out whether any corrupt practice had taken place.
Okay.
When this went to the Lieutenant Governor, he found that these are irregular things which had happened, and normally these would not happen unless there was a semblance of irregularity or corruption involved. So I think to set the matters straight, he referred it to the CBI, which is, I think, just the right thing to do. Now the CBI does not register a case immediately on receiving a complaint. They first do a preliminary investigation. Their preliminary investigation means you go into all the records which are available with the government. Now, of course, cell phones and all are not available with the government. So if a prima facie case is made out, then only they register the case. Having registered the case means the prima facie case is made out against 15 people. And if you see the list of the accused, there are at least 7 or 8 private individuals there.
Yes.
And the allegation against them is that they participated in the excise formation policy and also participated in the bidding. Now, if that is so, if that is proved, that alone is a corrupt practice. Now, on whose part that is a correct practice has to be determined. And first it will be determined by the CBI, and finally the courts will decide. So I don't think we need to get too excited about it.
No, but Mr. Sehgal, can I ask a simple question? When you say corrupt practice, explain to our viewers in this case, what would construe a corrupt practice? Changing a policy? Well, yeah, you can argue that procedural, flaws were there. The Chief Secretary was not intimated. The Cabinet was not intimated, so on and so forth. But when you say corrupt practice, how may have that happened in this case?
There is a section, if I'm mistaken if it is 13 or 17, I think it is 17, of the Prevention of Corruption Act. I think it's sub-rule 4, I can't remember now, which defines a corrupt practice, which defines corruption. And that says that if you commit an irregularity which benefits a private party or benefits you yourself, that itself is defined as corruption. It is actually not called corruption, it is called criminal misconduct. Now, criminal misconduct is a criminal misconduct, and I think there's 5 or 6 years imprisonment provided for it.
Okay.
So it is a serious offence, and coming against a public servant, it becomes doubly serious. And CBI is the authority which is competent to investigate cases under the Prevention of Corruption Act.
Okay.
That is why the EOW, the Economic Offences Wing of the Delhi Police, has stopped its investigation, and they are probably going to hand over all their papers to the CBI. So I think CBI is the right agency. Let us not judge its fairness and not fairness till the courts have had a look at the evidence.
But let me ask Kailash Adhikari, you know, one of the questions that's being asked of the BJP is also that today Kejriwal came out and said that, you know, Delhi's education model is so being praised around the world, including in the New York Times, that Manish Sisodia should be given the Bharat Ratna. Be that as it may, that's a political point, it's a political boast, if you will. But why is there this perception, Kailash, that the BJP is using agencies like the ED, IT, CBI, etc., only against opposition parties, never against one of their own?
You know, firstly, Zaka, I'd like to begin by saying that the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi mentioned that he got contacted regarding that all the cases would be vanished if he comes to the BJP. Now, at the post of a Deputy Chief Minister making such, claims without any solid proof and without showing that solid proof, even if that person has, is somewhat loose talk. And a Deputy Chief Minister does not, as it is said, shobha nahi deta ek Deputy Chief Minister ko ye baatein karne mein. Secondly, all the investigative agencies, according to me, they are very competent agencies. The people who are, heading it, or the people who are working under it, they are competent people. They have passed certain stringent examinations, and that is why they are working there. And only, as Mr. Sehgal very rightly pointed out, that only if there is under their preliminary investigation, if they feel that there is incriminating evidence, then only, they register a particular case, and then the searches and the investigation start. So, it has become a fashion for the opposition parties to mention that the government is blatantly using CBI and ED. Even when the opposition party was in power prior to 2014, there were cases which the CBI and ED, they were functioning. It is not that only the CBI and ED are functioning after 2014, Zaka. So such claims should not be made by the opposition. And in all fairness, the investigative agencies, they investigate the case basis the evidence. And if a person is feeling aggrieved by it, then it's a democracy, and judiciary is one of the pillars of democracy. And the doors are open for it.
Judicial recourse is always available. Sanju Verma, is this entire thing being couched ahead of the Gujarat Assembly elections? Because you'll remember last time in 2017, the BJP could win only 99 out of 182 seats. Do you feel that this time the contest is going to be between AAP versus BJP, and Arvind Kejriwal may be able to pull off something that Rahul Gandhi could not last time around?
Zaka, let's be very clear that in February 2021, we had the Gujarat Municipal Corporation elections. The Aam Aadmi Party won 27 seats in Surat. But what people do not highlight, and what needs to be highlighted, and which I'm doing on your show, is that Aam Aadmi Party lost stock and barrel, lost deposits in Gandhinagar, lost all deposits in Rajkot, lost all deposits in Bhavnagar, lost all deposits in Ahmedabad, lost all deposits in Jamnagar. So one swallow does not a summer make, so they can keep preening about winning 27 seats in Surat. Even that happened because they had the support of Patidar Anmat Andolan Samiti, PAS. And now the ties between Patidar Anmat Andolan Samiti and Kejriwal have gone down the tube. Point number 2. I think proof of the pudding is always in the eating. Do you remember prior to the Uttarakhand polls which happened earlier this year, Aam Aadmi Party said we will get at least 55 to 60 out of the 70 seats in Uttarakhand because Congress is not a player in the equation, and Bharatiya Janata Party will say anti-incumbency. And what was the result? In 55 out of the 70 seats that Aam Aadmi Party contested, 90% of those seats, they lost deposits, lost stock and barrel. In some of the seats, they got lower number of votes than even Nota. So Aam Aadmi Party can see Mungeri Lal ke Haseen Sapne and, be happy about wanting to win Gujarat. But the fact is that under BJP, despite being in power for more than 3 odd decades, today the per capita income in Gujarat is 2,35,000 versus national average of 1,46,000. 47 lakh people are employed in the MSME sector in Gujarat, the highest ratio for that sector.
All right.
37% of India's FDI came into Gujarat last year. So BJP has done a commendable job, and there is pro-incumbency, not anti-incumbency.
No. The fact is that in politics, whenever a party rules 10, 20, 30 years in this case, there will always be a sense of anti-incumbency that sets in. But anyway, be that as it may, I want to ask Priyanka Kakkar, the whole claim to fame of the Aam Aadmi Party, your party, was that you are an anti-corruption party. That's how the genesis of your party was through the India Against Corruption movement. But today, with Satinder Jain in jail, now your Manish Sisodia is under investigation, could likely go to jail. Has that plank of anti-corruption and crusaders against corruption been taken away from your party?
Not at all, Zaka. I am a very proud member of the Aam Aadmi Party, which takes pride in the fact that we have zero tolerance towards corruption. Let me also state this, that the spokesperson before me was mentioning about our performance in Gujarat. Let me state it on record that we got, in the BJP ka Garh, we got 28% vote share in Surat and 21% vote share in Gandhinagar, and that's where the problem began. We are also the fastest growing party globally, and that is a threat to this BJP. And
but Priyanka, how isn't it early days already, when you're already saying 2024 is going to be Modi versus Kejriwal? BJP is in power in 17 states in this country. Aam Aadmi Party is in power in 2. Not even 2. I mean, Delhi is not even a full state.
People are very aware. They are seeing that Delhi model means that if we tax you, whether directly or indirectly, that tax goes back to the citizens in form of welfare schemes, whether it is free travel, whether it is CCTV, whether it is free education, whether it is free electricity, cheapest electricity, whether it is free water. So people are seeing this. People are seeing that BJP was ousted thrice in Delhi. Congress was ousted thrice in Delhi. People are seeing what is happening in Punjab. People are also aware of the fact that I just mentioned the vote share that we got in Gujarat in our first elections. So today, Arvind Kejriwal ji is the only contender to BJP, and that is a threat. That is creating a threat for the BJP.
In terms of seats, in terms of footprint, I'm not sure about that. But one thing is clear, Sanju Verma, that in terms of the other regional satraps, whether it is a KCR or a Mamata Banerjee or even a Sharad Pawar, Arvind Kejriwal has cross-state appeal. They are in power in Delhi, they are in power in Punjab, they've won 2 seats in Goa. They've got footprints in a lot many states. They might do okay in Gujarat. So he is one person who has cross-state appeal, unlike a Mamata or a Stalin or a KCR.
Zaka, what I'm surprised about is the fact that Aam Aadmi Party keeps saying that, we are the fastest growing party. They also need to acknowledge the fact that they have contested assembly elections in Goa twice. And each time they, with false bravado, declared Goa Sarkar hum banayenge. In 2017, they had a 6% vote share in Gujarat. This time also, in Goa. This time also they had a 6% share in vote share in Goa.
Where was BJP in 10 years?
May I please finish? I did not interrupt you. Please hold your horses. Now let me tell you one more thing. Recently in June 2022, I am surprised Aam Aadmi Party lost the by-poll in Sangrur, which is the bastion of the current Chief Minister Bhagwant Singh Mann. You lost the Sangrur seat to Shiromani Akali Dal. So please stop sitting here and giving a lecture.
But ma'am, that same party won 90 seats in Punjab just 5 months ago. How many seats did your party win? But anyway, be that as it may. No, that's a separate issue. By-elections don't necessarily reflect the way assembly polls go. But I want to go back to both Umesh Sehgal as well as to Kailash Adhikari. Kailash Adhikari, is this about politics? Is this about elections? Is this about the fear in the BJP that Aam Aadmi Party might do better than expected in Gujarat, might even pose a challenge therefore? Or is it that Mr. Sisodia and the others who've been named, the public officials certainly, need to come clean on why in the middle of the pandemic they had to change Delhi's excise policy, why these waivers were given, and why this earnest money that was deposited by some of the private players had to be given by the state exchequer, which is an unseen and unheard of practice.
Zaka, first a policy is being made, then the policy is being referred to for recommendation, then the recommendations come, and then suddenly you reverse that particular policy. So all these elements or all these steps that have been taken lead to the fact that you've come with unclean hands, as it is said in legal terms. So naturally, the Aam Aadmi Party has to answer these things, that why the deviations first in introducing that policy, why the sudden deviations of again going back, and why this anomalies or abnormalities were there. So these are the
Okay.
very factual questions in front of the Aam Aadmi Party.
Umesh Sehgal, I'll give you the final word. Again, I come back to that moot point. Change of policy, every government does. Central government does, state governments do. But whether that change of policy resulted in undue benefits to some, and whether those benefits then found their way back to the public officials who changed the policy, how easy or difficult would that be to prove in a court of law?
Well, I'm not very sure that it percolated to any public servant, but there is no doubt that unfair advantage was given to many of these tenderers, especially the ones whom earnest money was returned, because there was no such condition in the tenders. The second important thing is that in the framing of the policy, what they did was they fixed the excise duty from a particular area.
Yeah.
Earlier it was per bottle. Suddenly what happens is, if all of them get together and half the shops are closed, the entire sale will go to the other half shops. So the sales will go up, which is exactly what has happened, but the government revenue will go down drastically, which is what has happened. So somebody should have anticipated this. And if it has not been done, it is a drastic failure. Whether it is criminal failure or not, I think the courts will have to determine.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Umesh Sehgal, Sanju Verma, Priyanka Kakkad, Amit Gill, and of course Kailash Adhikari. I want to thank all of you for joining us on this big story. It continues. The political ripples of it continue. Like I said, Manish Sisodia and Arvind Kejriwal are in Gujarat, where they are hoping to take the political attack to Modi's home turf. Meanwhile, the other big story, Russia today making a sensational disclosure that they've detained an ISIS suicide bomber who is entrusted with the mission to target BJP leaders here in India. This man has been identified as Azamov. He traveled to Turkey and was asked by his handler there to go to India and avenge the perceived insult to Prophet Muhammad. So does this incident raise once again the prospects of ISIS terror continuing to haunt India? So this is ISIS's Bleed India plot. It was thwarted after a suspect who was recruited was brought into the ISIS ranks as a suicide bomber. Remember, this man, Azamov, has been identified as a suicide mission bomber. In fact, he was indoctrinated remotely while he was in Turkey. He was in Turkey in the earlier part of this year and then traveled to Russia. The mission was basically to fly to India for what was termed a high-profile terror attack. The attack was asked to be carried out at the behest of ISIS for, quote-unquote, insulting the Prophet. The modus operandi was that he would blow himself up against a public representative of the ruling party. He was to meet a handler here in India who would then provide material and logistic help, and then he would be tasked to carry this out. All right, so how worried should India be that this Russian national has been apprehended? He was recruited by ISIS to carry out a high-profile terror attack here in India. Professor Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert, joining us. Glenn Carl is a former CIA officer and author. Fred Wire, political analyst and Russian affairs expert. Professor Brahma Chalani, I'll start with you first. The worry is that, okay, today it was Russia, a friendly country, that apprehended such a man, and they informed us subsequently. This could have very well happened in a country that is not so friendly to India, whether it's a Turkey or whether it's other countries in the Middle East which don't have ties or favorable ties with India. It could even be a Pakistan. How worried should India be about this threat of ISIS, particularly a few years after it was thought to have substantially been cut down to size?
Well, it's an interesting question. The fact is that ISIS, as it existed in Syria and Iraq, is no longer a potent force. It has been completely dismantled. The remnants of ISIS operating, they are driven largely by ideological considerations. There's no organizational structure. And in fact, the big attacks that have been blamed on ISIS have actually been blamed on ISIS-K, which is actually a group that has no link with the original ISIS of the late Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. In fact, ISIS-K, which operates mainly from Afghanistan, is part of Pakistani intelligence deception operations to build plausible deniability in terror attacks. So we have a very complex situation, and the Russians haven't really provided clarity on the arrests that they have made. They have provided very few details of the alleged link of ISIS with this plot against a Indian ruling party figure. I wish there were more details for us so that we could draw some conclusions. But unfortunately, the details are so sketchy from the Russian side.
Fred, we have seen Russia also dealing with its own, terrorism question when it comes to Chechnya, the Chechen terrorists, when it comes to, things like the Beslan school hostage crisis that we saw a few years ago. But in your experience, have you seen something of this sort where a Russian national is detained and he was supposedly out to carry out an attack in another country because of events that happened there and because of perceived insults, and the Russians detained him or her and then intimated the concerned country? Has such a thing ever come to light before?
In that level, I'm not sure. I know that there are lots and lots of Russians, people from Central Asia, who went south to fight with ISIS in Syria in years past, and who came back. It's a constant headache for Russian security, and they have a lot of experience with their own people and, wives and children. There's just a whole story there where the Russian services have got a lot of experience. So what I think this particular story underscores is the real importance of maintaining that international cooperation, that intergovernment, interagency communication, cooperation. It seems so boring, day in and day out. Nobody ever pays attention to it. Then suddenly it pays off. And that's happened here, that Russia and India have maintained good intergovernmental relations, strong communication. They do it all the time, probably on many different levels. And this is the only way to combat that transnational threat.
Glenn Carl, again, one of the things that is worrisome about this particular apprehension and this particular detention is lone wolf attacks. This man was operating, by all accounts, on his own. He was a single member of this cell, as it were. Of course, he had handlers in Turkey. But how easy or difficult would it be for agencies, security agencies around the world, to deal with such lone wolf attacks or potential attacks? Because, as Brahma Chalani was saying a moment ago, there isn't really much of an organizational structure of ISIS the way it used to exist a few years ago. Now you're basically dealing with individual cases, and how much micro can our security agencies go to?
Yes, it's an important point, and it's one that is largely lost on the publics in the world, whether Indian, American, or Russian, I'm sure, and that has been at the root of two things. One, the evolution of the jihadist or Muslim terrorist threat, and the responses by various governments to it. So what I mean is that 20 years ago, when I was deeply involved in the struggle against Al-Qaeda, hierarchical organizations were the dominant terrorist threat of the time. Not state-sponsored terrorism, which is another mistake made by many governments, but organizations like Al-Qaeda. The United States largely destroyed Al-Qaeda as a particularly capable institution. But more importantly than that, jihadist terrorism has evolved to the kind of lone wolf threat that you say, which is an exponentially more difficult target for intelligence services, be they Indian, Russian, or American, than a hierarchical, discrete entity. It is the persistent approach or kind of threat that has existed now dominantly for 15 years and will continue in the future. And it's exceptionally difficult for any intelligence organization to penetrate a non-existent organization. And profiling terrorists is also extremely difficult. So this is the current and ongoing challenge, and it is a difficult one.
Brahmacharani, doesn't it also bring into sharp focus the fact that here you have an Indian politician having said something, howsoever incendiary that might have been, but that is now giving cause to somebody sitting tens of thousands of miles away. The perceived insult is so grave that he or she feels like coming all these thousands of miles and then physically hurting the said person.
Well, the fact is that even if this person had said nothing, even if this incident had not happened, India, like Israel or the West, would have remained a target of jihadi terrorists. The fact is that jihadi theology helps link diverse Islamist groups and individuals around the world. And I think it's obvious that the only way to defeat an enemy driven by a pernicious ideology, an ideology that seeks to kill in the name of God, can you believe it? That there are people in this world who believe that God is telling them to kill other human beings. It is this kind of pernicious ideology that needs to be discredited. Unfortunately, what has happened is that the international war on terror has focused on eliminating individual terrorists, but not on fighting the ideology, discrediting the ideology. The jihadist ideology is very important because unless you don't discredit that ideology, then individuals are going to, in the name of God and religion, carry out brutal acts. And this reality, unfortunately, has yet to sink in. Our policy focus remains on scoring isolated wins against Islamist groups and individuals, rather than finding ways to discredit and emasculate this jihadist ideology.
Fred Wire, you know, Russia's also faced the brunt of the other side, which is Russia is also accused of using militia groups, some of them, you know, Muslim and Islamist in nature. The Kadyrov Brigade is one that comes to mind straight away. So Russia's experience in dealing with such private armies or private militias, if you will, to extend its own influences, to extend its own leverage far away from its borders, that has also been drawn into question. So it's like what Hillary Clinton said. I mean, if you're going to grow snakes in your backyard, they are going to turn around and bite you one day.
Yeah, I think this is a somewhat different thing, but yes, of course, Russia is engaged in whatever we'll call it neo-imperial machinations in many places in the Middle East, and certainly right now a major war in Ukraine, and it is mobilizing all kinds of forces to fight in a hybrid ways to fight this. It's not the first, it's the biggest, but before that in Chechnya it fought two long and brutal, bitter wars. I covered them both. This is different from non-state actor terrorism, the kind of lone wolf thing you were talking about earlier, but this is definitely a feature of the landscape today, and the crisis besetting the world. And by the way, Russia isn't the only country guilty in this sort of behavior, but certainly Russia is in thick into it.
Glenn Carl, I'll give you the final word. You know, many would argue that it's about friendly countries and unfriendly countries. In this case, Russia and India are friendly countries, therefore they intimated India right after this came to light. But here again, countries like Turkey, this man, Azimov, is said to have traveled to Turkey. His handler was supposed to be in Turkey. Russia and Turkey do have a lot of issues, but at the same time, they also have cooperated. They also have live ongoing cooperation. In fact, let's not forget that one of the few leaders that Putin has met with in the last 6 months is Erdogan. Where do countries like India, how do they learn to deal with countries like Turkey or a Pakistan or a Qatar for that matter, where they might be useful for such intimation as well?
Well, there, unusually, I have a relatively optimistic interpretation or view of events. Even countries that are politically at odds in any number of issues, in most instances, will have a relatively healthy relationship between the intelligence services on compatible subjects. And individual lone wolf jihadists, in most instances, are a compatible issue to deal with. So Turkey and India, and even sometimes Pakistan and India, the services will work together. There are a few states that completely cynically exploit jihadists. Pakistan's probably one of the worst, but on the whole, the intelligence services will work together on this kind of issue.
All right. We'll leave it at that. This is a wake-up call, no doubt about it. The arrest of a Russian national who was tasked with killing a senior political figure here in India because of a perceived insult to Prophet Muhammad. Let's see how this story plays out in the days and weeks ahead. I want to thank all three of our guests, Glenn Carl, Fred Wire, Brahmacharani, for joining us here on Brass Tacks. Quick break here on the program. When we come back, aspiring teachers are thrashed and dragged in Patna simply for protesting against a 3-year delay in their recruitment.